at her? And I said, sure. And lo and behold, it was true. When she played the violin, she couldn't bend her elbow. And I said to myself, and this was the crucial, this was the step. This was the crucial thing. I said to myself, what would I have to think to move like that? And by that time, I already knew that everybody gets confused about their bodies when they go through the adolescent growth spurt. You go from being an expert kid over a period of about 2 or 3 months to being a totally incompetent adult. God just says, ah, and gives you a big shot of growth hormones and other hormones, and suddenly you're not yourself anymore. And recovering from that shock takes everybody a long time before they sort of say, oh yeah, this is still me and this is my body. So anyhow, I knew about that. So what would I have to think to move the way that girl? And so I said to her, well, look, when did you start playing the violin? And she gave the standard American answer, when I was 9. So I said, okay, when you were 9, your elbow was about this far from your shoulder. But you've grown. And now your elbow is down here. And she said, oh, so it is. Oh, well, I can do that. End of story for her. And I saw her 10 years later somewhere, and I said, Julie, you're famous all over the world because of this thing that you and I did at George Hardesty's studio. And she said, I have no memory of that at all. But she was still playing the violin with her elbow moving. But for me, pow! It was an explosion in my head because I said, okay, if that's true, now what was going on with her? If you think your elbow is here, and there's something to feel there for sure, if you think that's your elbow, first of all, it's in the middle of a bone and you can't possibly bend it. 2, this, in your understanding of yourself, is also in the middle of the bone, and you better not bend that because it would be, it would break. It would be awful. So there she was, earnestly trying not to move a joint that was there, and earnestly trying to move a joint that was not there. So she couldn't bend her elbow. So then, because in my upbringing, my father was very interested in a thinker called Alfred Korzybski. Has anybody here ever heard of Korzybski? He called what he did general semantics. But is the crucial piece, his crucial insight was, he put it in this form: the map is not the territory. So he realized that we make maps of the entire world in our brain. What's a map? A map is a representation in one medium of something that exists in another medium. The standard, the sort of basic case of that is a street map or a geographical map that, you use to get from my hotel to this venue here. And it tells me turn left here, turn right there, and you'll be at the venue. And it leaves out a whole lot of information that doesn't matter. But it gives me the crucial information that does matter. maps are like that. And your representation of the world in your brain, however that works, is a map. And it's not identical to the world, but it's good enough to go by. And part of that map is your map of your own body, its structure, its function, its size, all that stuff. And first of all, it's fine. You all got here. You're all dressed. You have all had breakfast, or not. And so your map of the world and your body in the world is in many ways perfectly adequate. And it's how you understand yourself physically and in terms of how you move. So this map tells you about the shape and size and movement of your body. And you also use it to give yourselves instructions for movement. I have this, this is all metaphorical. It's totally inaccurate, I'm sure. But I think of a little room in there somewhere, and some sensation comes in, goes through the map room, and the map room guys say, that's the middle finger of your right hand. And then I say, I want to move the middle finger of my right hand. Goes through the map room guys send the messages to the right place, and I move the middle finger of my right hand. Simple. It just happens. Unless there's something in my sensory appreciation, that is my map, that is a little squeegeed around, like Julie, the violinist, who thought her elbow was here. And she interpreted her sensations as if her elbow was there, and as if her elbow was not here. So when she went to move according to that map, and she couldn't bend her elbow. And when we corrected the map, oh, I can do that. So we spent the next many years just sort of systematically exploring our and our students' maps to see what we thought, what they thought, and comparing it to what we could find out that was the real thing. And that ended up in, who has the green book? Somebody. No, but somebody has it here. Anya, where are you? There you are. So, thank you. Yes. So, this book, thanks, is the basic text of body mapping. And it tells the theory, it tells that, I wrote a thing in the back of it that tells the origin story, and then there is just full of, there's a whole big chapter, common body mapping errors. And, thanks. And if you want to know about body mapping systematically, buy that book. It's still in print and not very expensive. And you can pay attention to it. Now, okay, so it's very useful to know a lot, for an Alexander teacher, to know a lot about that, about how the body is put together and how people think it's put together, and what effect their maps have on their experience of their lives and of their ability to move. If you know that stuff, then you'll come upon somebody and they'll be moving in a certain way that you're saying, why are they doing that? You ask yourself, what's in their map? And if you know about this stuff systematically, you can say, I recognize that. This person thinks, let's do a little game here. So I'm going to ask you about your left hand, and I want you to look at your left hand, the palm side of it, and we're going to be talking about the index finger, okay? And I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to give your first thoughts answer. I'm going to ask you to point to something. And I don't want you to experiment. I don't want you to cogitate. I just want you to first thoughts. It's a good way to find out what's in your map. So I'm going to ask about the first finger, and I'm going to ask about the joint of the first finger with the palm. And I want you to point to that joint. 1, 2, 3, go. And so now please, you'll need 2 hands. So I want you, now hold it up so that I can see. Okay, so I'm seeing, on the palm side please, I'm seeing about well over 50% of the people are pointing to this. Somebody is pointing way down here. Some people are pointing here, and some people are pointing here.
I can show that pen.
I would have a different color pen, but I don't. It doesn't matter. Some people are pointing down here where the dotted line is. So would you please now explore your own hand and find out what's true? Where is that joint actually? Who's surprised?
Confused?
Yeah. It's way down here. Try it. That's the joint of...
Built it in.
What? No.
Antoinette just said, oh, wow.
I was close, but it was not
Yep.
it was just
Yes!
the bone of the other one is a little earlier than I thought.
Yes. Isn't that interesting? So, and you've heard this story. This is not new to you.
I've experimented and I've looked at it and felt it, but I was looking for the bump rather than the end of the bone.
Right. So now, move your fingers, whatever you thought, move your fingers from, because it's the same with all, that's why I drew it, it's the same for every finger. And then move it the way where you thought the joint was. Right? Well, we could spend the rest of the day, we aren't going to, but we could spend the rest of the day systematically exploring our bodies, and everybody would say, oh yes, I knew that, and some people would say, what? And it would be, and over the course of this weekend, we'll be working together, and I'll say, or somebody else will say, oh, wait a minute, what do you know about this? Where do you think that is? And somebody's going to say, what? There? And we could, as I say, we could go through the body systematically and say this and that and the other thing, but I don't want to take the time to do that. Well, I want to do a couple things. In the same way, first thoughts, point to where you think your knee is. Okay, so I'm seeing even in the front row, whole lot of differences. Okay, so Patrick, you've got it. That's where your knee joint is. Come up here, would you? And have a seat. And this tells us something about language too. So the joint is actually way down here. Yeah, right. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Can you let it there? Just let it swing. There. See, that's where the joint is. Find it on yourself. Now, here's a thing about language. Knee, like head and hip and all kind of things, has many different meanings. So, yes, bingo, 100%, is that whole region of your body this is my knee. On the hips is another one. You have a hip joint, but hip is anything from here to here. And it's where's the joint? And not quite, Jenny. And the interesting thing about body maps is a miss is as good as a mile. If you're off by, that's what Antoinette just discovered. If you're off by a half an inch, you might as well be off by 2 feet, because you won't be sending the message to the actual place the message needs to get to. So thanks. That's right. And so that's almost all I want to say about that, because I've introduced the basic concept. And once you understand the basic concept, then you've got all you need to go ahead and explore to your heart's content your own body and your students' maps of their body. Bruce Furtman used to stand up in front of a skeleton and say, "What looks wrong to me?" And he used that to identify the discrepancies between the skeleton, which was there, and it was a skeleton, and his own map of himself. There are lots of ways to do this. And it's a map. Now, we're working, and by we, I mean this group of people influenced by me and Peter. We're working with something a little different than this. Mapping is very useful and very important and dangerous, because if you start mixing up the map for the territory, you're going to get in trouble. Peter's way of working and mine. This is a sidebar. I used to, in my Alexander classes, I used to spend the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks of 2 sessions a week on body mapping. Now I don't do that. I just use it when I need it. But my former wife, Barbara, franchised it, and she made it a thing by itself, independent of the Alexander technique. And that, though I have great respect for her in many ways, was a false move. Because it mistakes the map for the, it mistakes the map and the territory. It essentially, instead of using the map to explore the territory, which is what's real, it makes the map the territory. Does that make sense? And that is a trap.
Can you say that again? The map.
Yeah, I'll try. Can you play it back? Okay, we map the world. Our maps are not identical to the world. By definition, if they were identical to the world, they would be the world, right? So if you have a GPS on your phone and you want to say, how do I get from my house to Christchurch? It will tell you how to get here, leaving out all the twists and turns in the road and the dogs and the trees and the germs and the wind and the puddles, all of which are really there and totally immaterial to getting you from your house to here, right? So maps are useful for what they leave out as much as for what they put in. And a good map will tell you just what you need to know and nothing you don't need to know. Does that answer the question you were asking? Thanks. Yes.
What's the danger that you see with?
Okay, thank you. You put me back on track, which is very, very helpful. So the danger is that you'll mistake the map for the territory. Okay, what's the map? I said this before, but we'll come back to it. A map is a description or a representation in one medium of something that exists somewhere else. And we've been talking about geographical maps, and we've been talking about body maps. And there are pictures, and there are words. And when I use words, I'm mapping the university and the universe, and the university. And those of you for whom English is not your first language, or those of you for whom English is your first language, but you know some other ones, you know that the map of the world in German is not the same as the map of the world in English. And sometimes it's easy to shift between them, and sometimes it's not, even with German. And when I started learning Japanese, it was like somebody emptied a tub of cold water over my head, because I know several languages pretty well. And Japanese, the way Japanese maps the world is remarkably different from the way any Indo-European language maps the world. I didn't expect that when I went into my first Japanese class. And it does not compute. And but then eventually it did, and I now understand, to some extent, the world through the eyes of Japanese language, Japanese grammar and stuff. So, but you can also have maps of maps. We're talking about what I call the rational, symbolic, analytical model of the world. It's a way of thinking. We start as little children learning that way of thinking. Rational, symbolic, analytical. We learn language, we learn words, we learn grammar. And we eventually have pictures, we have mathematics, which is also a map of various ways of mapping the world. And we have maps of maps. It can be recursive. And there's the real world. Then there's our maps of it, and our maps may or may not match the world well, but we also have maps of maps. And there's a way in which the map can get detached from the world. And a simple example of that is the people who thought that the end of the world was going to come last August. There were such people who were sure that August, I forget what it was, 23rd, 2025, was going to be the end of the world. And it wasn't, as far as I know. And that there's a whole history of people who knew that, some of them got into white robes and went up and stood on the top of a hill. It really happened. It was a map of the world. It didn't match the world, but they were sure it did. And there are religious maps that get totally detached from reality, and there are political maps that get, I love this one. Every country knows, the people of that country who are interested in this kind of thing, know that the boundaries of their country are rightly equal with the largest boundaries that country ever had. So we were talking about it yesterday, Macedonia in the Balkans, Serbia in the Balkans. The Serbians know that Serbia is as big as Serbia, the largest Serbia there ever was. Whereas the Croatians know, no, the real map is the largest territory that Croatia ever. I mean, that's mistaking the map for the territory. And it gets, and people fight and die over this nonsense. I mean, they really do. It's happening right now in several places with tragic effect. Okay, what's wrong with, that's what's wrong with mapping. If you get so interested in mapping, one of the things that mapping does is it cuts things up in pieces. That's why we call it the rational, symbolic, and by symbolic I don't mean in Shakespeare's play this word symbolizes this, Metterlink or whatever, symbolic poetry, yes.
I suspect there are some people here who don't know your...
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. but I'm doing it slowly, too slowly.
No.
But what I'm really starting with is what's wrong with mapping. We've talked about what's good about it. We've talked about, oh yeah, you think your elbow's here, but it's really here. You think, go back to your fingers. If you were a pianist and you thought that your finger joints were here, just wiggle your fingers to play the piano as if the joints were here. Hundreds and thousands of innocent children have struggled with piano lessons because they're trying to bend their fingers in the middle of a bone. And then violinists, cellists, flute players, everybody. So it's very important, very useful stuff. But it's always, and here's the real piece of it that's crucial. Maps make things hold still. Language makes things hold still. Mathematics makes things hold still. Pictures make things hold still. Any kind of a map makes things hold still, and life does not hold still. So here's the next piece. I was teaching, and it was the first day of the first class of the year, and there was this young woman who was in the class who was in her first experience with graduate school and her first experience with the Alexander technique, and she was a kid who was almost pathologically compliant. And so I did what I was doing in those days when I started a Alexander class, was I just went around and gave everybody a little up. And they'd say, oh yeah, they would all move, and they said, what? I came to her, and it was like I had come to a block of wood. I couldn't move her head, or get her to move her head for nuts. It was just totally rigid, and she was sitting there wanting desperately to please me and do what I wanted her to do and comply. And I got this flash, and I said, oh, when you want to pay close attention to something, it needs to hold still, right? And I took, I need something printed. Who's got a book? With printing in it. Yeah, that's the bunny. Great, so, I don't know you. Ilka. Okay, read this.
Yeah.
So, what do you want to say to me?
Well, hold it still.
Hold it still. And of course, if I hold it still, you can read it.
Yeah.
So that's one way of, thanks, Anya. That's one way of paying close attention to. It's a strategy for paying close attention to things. And in some ways, you in some situations, that's what you need. You need what you're paying attention to hold still. So I explained this. I said, well, I did just what I did just now. And I said, but if what I want you to what you want to pay attention to is in motion, holding it still, if you hold it still, the very thing you're trying to pay attention to ceases to exist. Right? If you're trying to pay attention to something in motion and you hold it still, it's gone. There's nothing to pay attention to. So I said, but you do know how to pay attention to things in motion. You know, you can walk through a crowded room and not bump into people. You can drive safely in traffic. You can follow your conductor. You can do all kinds of stuff. And I said, that's the kind of attention that I'd like you to pay when I show you this. She said, okay. And she went up like a skyrocket. She just moved perfectly, freely and easily, and it was nothing. And there was one of those situations where she said, oh, okay, I get that. And I said, whoa, this is a big deal. When you try to run your life according to a body map, which is holding things still, can you move? You can't, and that's the trap. If you get fixated on the map, you can't move, and you can't do Alexander. So now I'm going to come to the thing. This is the remedy for compulsive body mapping. This is what could be wrong with body mapping. So I think about kind of levels of how we pay attention to the world. First is what we call the literal level. And the literal level is just the world as it presents itself to us. Solids, liquids, and gases, energy of all kinds, electromagnetic energy, including the physiology of the human body and how it works and how it's put together. That's all literal. And mostly we don't experience the world that way unless we sort of sometimes, when you first wake up or you're on some kind of a drug trip or meditative thingamy, you can maybe experience the world with. Peter was playing with this yesterday. It was really great. He was saying, work with each other without any words, without thinking about words. And that was interesting because it was kind of getting back to that literal level. That word is often misunderstood when people are talking about life. They say, well, you're taking me too literally. And that's not, that's saying something different. Second level, the rational, symbolic, analytical level. Words, pictures, mathematics, analysis, all that stuff. What we've been talking about. And in the rational, symbolic, you tend to have classical categories. Something is such if and only if it exhibits these characteristics. It's up or it's down. It's in or it's out. It's red or it's blue, but it can't be both. And so on. That's the rational symbolic. In the next stage, and this is the one where we're going to, I hope, be spending most of our time for the rest of the weekend, is what we call the paradoxical. And in the paradoxical, way of apprehending the world, it's always both and. So it's in and out, up and down, here and there, now and then. When is now? Is it this second, oh, gone, what that's it? No, it's now is what just happened, what's happening, and what's about to happen. So now is 25 past 11 GMT on whatever date it is today. Now is today. Now is this week, this month, this century, this millennium. Now is totally flexible. Here is this speck on my shirt. Here is my shirt. Here is me. Here is our room. Here is Southwark. Here is London. Here is the world. Here is the Milky Way galaxy. Here is this quark inside this atom, inside this molecule. It's all of the above, all at once. The rational symbolic way of thinking about things is about the literal world, and it's about itself. The paradoxical is about the literal world and the rational symbolic world. It includes both. The literal world is constantly changing. The rational symbolic world is fixed. And the paradoxical world is constantly shifting. It's constantly changing. And what I came to understand from my energy work informed point of view, and what Peter came to understand from whatever steps he came to understand it from, is that to do Alexander, you must be in what I'm calling the paradoxical state of mind. And so I spend my time now helping people get there so that they can operate easily and freely. And that's what Peter does. And what was so exciting was a year ago when I went to Peter's workshop in Dorset. Within the first, 2 minutes, I said, oh, he's doing what I'm doing. He's getting people into the paradoxical. And the interesting and exciting thing is, it's easy to do that. It doesn't take any effort at all. You just have to shift your point of view. You have to shift the way you're thinking about the world. It takes no effort. Marge used to say, my teacher, Marjorie Barstow, Marge used to say, this is just too simple for you. Lousy pedagogy makes your students feel useless, hopeless, and helpless, but she was so frustrated. If you try to do the Alexander technique from the rational symbolic. It's not difficult, it's impossible. You cannot do, I wish my neck to be free, my head to go forward and up, my back to lengthen and widen. I wish my neck to be free, my head to... Give me a break. You can't do it. And she was so frustrated because we were trying to do, and there's a reason for that. FM was very he was very committed to being rational, as he thought, about what he was doing and explaining it rationally. And Marge was like that too. She believed in reason, and she thought FM looked at himself in the mirror and he reasoned out that he was doing that and he needed to do something else. So he reasoned his way into that. Not true. That's not what FM actually did, I think. I think Peter thinks that's not what Alexander actually did. What Alexander actually did was he moved himself into this other state of mind, and he wrote it down in the universal constant. He said, I'm not going to waste time with that. We'll look it up later. But he said something like, I want to make it clear that what I'm after is a plane of, what am I trying to...
Conscious control is a plane to be reached.
That's
not
it.
a method of reaching it.
Right.
And he said it both in CCCI and UCL.
Yep. It's a plane to be reached. And what is also true is it's not a plane to be reached like this. It's a plane to be reached like this. You just change your mind and suddenly you're there. And it's totally effortless. That's it. That's all we know. That's all we need to know. Yes.
I think it's even better than effortless. It actually generates energy for you. It's like nuclear fusion.
I love that.
It generates energy.
I think you're right. I agree. And you know, Marge would say, well, if you pull down, you're wasting a lot of energy. But she didn't make that second step. But yeah. All right. I'm tired of hearing my own voice.
Bill, I just, my heart's just gone, oh my God, I love this. I love this. I love this. It makes me so happy.